A very warm welcome to you tonight. I don't know what the weather's like with you, but it's pretty miserable here in Edinburgh. But we've got Angie Lewin with us tonight. My name's Christina Jansen from the Scottish Gallery, and Angie's sitting there in her lovely studio in Speyside. And in the gallery we have Nature Assembled, which is a beautiful watercolour exhibition, which is in our upstairs gallery. It's absolutely knockout, and that is why there are so many people here tonight. So just to give you a brief background on Angie Lewin, she was born in Cheshire and studied fine art printmaking at Central St Martin's College of Art and Design between 1983 and 1986, followed by a year in printmaking at Camberwell School of Arts and Crafts. You've worked in London for a long time, Angie, as an illustrator, and you studied horticulture, which is key, and then subsequently moved to Norfolk, which prompted a return to printmaking. Many people will know Angie as a printmaker, but increasingly Angie is known as a superb watercolourist, and she lives in Edinburgh and she lives in Speyside. And as I said, Angie is in Speyside right now. In 2016, Angie received the Royal Watercolour Society Award, which is a tremendous award after your name. We've had several watercolour artists in the gallery admiring your show, as well as lots of other people. I would really like to thank people who have made the journey to come to Edinburgh. We know that it's an anxious time, and Nature Assembled by you, Angie, is a tremendous body of work created over 2 years, which you're going to tell us all about, and it's a fantastic achievement. So thank you, Angie, for producing the exhibition. How are you tonight, Angie?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Yes, yeah, we were just sort of talking about the weather up here on Speyside. It's been a bit changeable, to say the least, but yeah, I'm on good form actually. Yeah, recovered after doing all the paintings, and yeah, just getting back into doing little bits of work now. I've been doing a little bit of printmaking and working on some little paintings and things. So yeah, that's ticking along.
Well, I know that you work on so many things, and I know that you had to carve out 2 years to produce this. And when we were speaking throughout the year, you did say that printmaking is a different head for you, but so many people have come in and they've really admired the compositions, which are completely related to the watercolors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen just so that we've got some of the images of the exhibition and the work. So if you just bear with me. Here we go. So this is a beautiful catalogue as well. It has all of the new work in it, designed by Simon Lewin, who is in the background there. Thank you, Simon. It was real teamwork. So this is when technology is a wonderful thing. There we go. So you can see the edges around this particular painting, the Dahlias, Astrantia and Fern. So this was immediately a classic image, which I thought would be a brilliant cover on your publication. And I think you wanted to talk about the Dahlias as a particular motif within your work, Angie. So why don't we just kick off with this one?
Yeah, well, basically, there's a sort of thing, I always used to say this actually a few years ago when I was mainly, well, pretty much exhibiting only prints and making prints, was that there were certain things in my prints that are always very sort of skeletal, architectural, wildflowers, quite sort of pared back and quite angular and graphic, and that I would never include things like peonies or dahlias in my work, despite actually really loving them. And actually over the years, I've started to draw them quite a lot, but watercolours have enabled me to include them in my work in a way that so far in printmaking I haven't done. And I think it's because they are almost the opposite of the kinds of things that I include in my prints, sort of things like the scabious and the dried seed heads on cliff tops. They're so exotic and clearly cultivated, at least in this country. The colours are so saturated. And I just really enjoyed including them in my work. It's given a whole new lease of life in a way, a whole extra strand to the watercolours that I do. They sort of just sit beside the others, and there's such a sort of contradiction in colour. And I get quite carried away when I'm painting them, actually. I can stylize them in ways that are just so infinite. They're fantastic flowers.
Well, it's a really clever composition because you do have these colour pops, and then you have the delicacy of the ferns. And what I see in the foreground around the pot here is this other abstract pattern which is there. I mean, you would almost think that they'd be fighting against one another, but you just manage to, you don't just manage it. It's part of your skill set. That's part of the beauty of this work. I've actually got a couple of really great questions. One from Valerie Nichols, which is, are you intending to keep concentrating on painting rather than printing? And then from John, I have a question which is, how do you find the change from printing to watercolour paintings? Your prints are graphic compared to the more delicate nature of the painting. I think that, again, we just touched on that. I touched on that earlier about the different heads that you have. Do you want to just expand on that a little bit, and I'll move on through some of the images?
Yes, well, I think I do want to carry on doing a lot of painting. I suppose because I trained as a printmaker, I've always exhibited a printmaker. There was always this sort of thing, is that's what I am. And when I was at Central St Martin's, it was like a subsection of the painting degree, the printmaking. And we were always seen as a separate group. We're slightly lesser beings, to be completely honest. The printmakers were lesser people than the painters. So it's absolutely great that although I've always done watercolours, and I've exhibited them for quite a few years now, it's become a really strong strand in what I do, and I love to do it. The transition between the two is an interesting question, because I always used to think there was quite a big difference between the way I think when I'm a printmaker and when I'm doing the paintings. And in terms of process, it is a big difference, because obviously with a watercolour, I'll do preliminary sketches, but I do a lot of working out on the painting itself, and it's very spontaneous. I can add as many colours as I want. When it's literally just putting brush to paper in the simplest form, that's what it is. Whereas with printmaking, I'm planning with preliminary sketches, cutting blocks, inking blocks, working out registration, so many different stages. But increasingly, as I look at my watercolours, the similarities with the layering of colour and the way I'll sometimes stencil elements through. I'll make stencils and stencil through with a sponge or spatter through. I'll make stencils by using masking fluid. So in that sense, I'm doing the stencils in the same way as I would do if I was doing a screen print. So yeah, there's more of a correlation between the two than I initially thought there was.
You started showing with the Scottish Gallery in 2009. You had an established career before that time, but I remember first engaging with your watercolours, and I really wanted to separate that element. I mean, as soon as I saw them, I thought, I think your work's great. I think your prints are superb. In fact, I'm more and more amazed as I learn little bits about how technically challenging they are, how much more I appreciate those. But separating the watercolours felt really important. And I have to say that when people have come in, I have said this has been an 8-year ambition for me to have you in the upstairs gallery. This is a really big sheet of paper, and this is just one. I love all the edges of this. I'm going to go through some of the images. Now, this is you sitting in slightly different weather in your beautiful Edinburgh garden. Now, I know that you got those poppies, pink poppies, salmon poppies from Waitrose. That's how intimately I know your garden. It is absolutely knockout. You have made, your neighbourhood look as if you're in a field. It's absolutely sensational. And I know that when you and Simon, you take an intense interest in gardening. Obviously, you studied horticulture. Here you are drawing in the garden. I mean, just explain what happens in your garden and how that feeds into your work, Angie.
Well, I think before we moved to Edinburgh, we've had the place on Speyside for about getting on for 20 years. But before we moved to Edinburgh, which is probably about 8-9 years ago, we were in North Norfolk and had a very sort of wild Norfolk garden. And the Edinburgh garden is quite small. really. But what I wanted to do was bring in that quality that you have when you've got a country garden. And initially I thought, oh, you know, how would that work? But there are lots of trees on the other, it's got a stone wall on two sides, the garden, and there's woodland on the other side. And so what I've done is aimed at anything that self-seeds into that garden, I keep up to a point. Obviously I do weed things out. And so just enabling the wild plants to mingle with the cultivated plants. And it's a way I've gardened for years. I've always loved that sense of a garden slightly being taken over by nature. And I suppose in my watercolours, that element of having wild plants and cultivated plants together, like you sort of talk about how the ferns and the dahlias almost shouldn't work together, but they do. There's that sort of, it's like if you have too much of one thing, it becomes too rich. If you eat too much chocolate cake, it's too rich. But if you offset that with something else, it kind of knocks it back. And maybe that's not a very good example. But, you know, it's that kind of getting the balance. So the exotic plants are almost emphasised by being next to something like a plantain or a dandelion. I really like that. The way that also what I like about the Edinburgh garden is the way that the neighbours' plants come into my garden, which I didn't have in Norfolk or on Speyside because we haven't really got proper neighbours. So somebody's really horrible pink sort of escallonia will come over the wall, and initially I think, oh, I don't really like that. But I think, no, I do like it because it then is offset by a planting of ferns, and it really, really works. It's quite exciting watching other plants encroach. And you can always cut them back anyway as they dangle over the fence. But yeah, so I've always let it be, like you said when we were talking earlier, it's so full of plants and a lot of them are very sort of tall, so you feel quite enveloped in it. I like that sort of feeling.
That is your nature assembled. I mean, that's your kind of, it's your beautiful place that you've created, but it's also informing all of these you know, you just have a never ending vocabulary of composition, but there it is. You can kind of see that in your garden. But when we were doing the running order for your exhibition, which I really enjoy that aspect, there is a seasonal aspect to it. So we were trying to follow the year, and we'll just touch on this. There's Angie in her garden. It is really beautiful. And here's Angie. This is a really successful composition. So you've taken one of your cups and you've laid out the, you know, a cylindrical object and laid it out flat. So you're really playing with perspective here. We've had so many people asking about how you actually do your watercolors, all the different technical aspects. It's been interesting having watercolor artists in and going up to each one. It's actually difficult to keep people on a timer because each painting is a gem. And there's so much in each painting that it does actually take a long time to go around the exhibition. I'll stop waffling and we'll go on, because talking about this year and talking about the seasons, we can't avoid talking about the lockdown. There are lots of negatives, which we're not going to talk about. We're going to talk about the positives. And so we could talk about the joy of auriculas, which is a plant I knew very little about, but you can tell me all about it from your point of view of one of the very big positives of the lockdown for you.
Yeah, well, yes, because when the lockdown started, we were in Edinburgh, so we stayed down in Edinburgh for obviously stayed for the entire lockdown, and the auriculas that I have in my garden. I've loved these plants for absolutely years, as a lot of people do. They're the kind of plants that people become obsessive about. And I bought them, over the years I've been buying them and doing sketches of them. The year before, so in 2019 I bought lots of them, and I actually managed miraculously to keep them alive through the winter. And then the start of lockdown coincided with when to start feeding them and when they would start to flower. So, and as I wasn't sort of flitting between Edinburgh and Speyside, I just stayed and did lots and lots of drawings and paintings of the auriculas. And it was just absolutely a wonderful thing to do. They have a relatively short flowering period, or at least the ones that I have sort of stopped flowering. Maybe I've got a couple of months of work out of them. And yeah, I mean, they're just such infinitely varied in their kind of the colours and perhaps the leaves that they have as well. So yeah, and I was just able to focus on them for that length of time, and I think that was really beneficial for me, actually. And the colours just got stronger and stronger. The background colours got stronger and stronger. So yeah, it did transform my work, I think, actually, at that point. My sense of colour, or my confidence with colour, increased, I think.
It's just the joy that you've managed to get this. I didn't realise how tricky it was. And yeah, this is a really lovely section within your exhibition. I think this is an important work. There's a couple of works that touch on this, and this is the strongest one. And when you first showed this to me, this one really jumped out at me as a really strong development in your work. You have got a lot of colour combinations in here that might not necessarily work, but you have pulled it off. I did have someone go up to this today wondering how you'd done this. Were you using a stencil and so on? This is a beautiful painting. It jumps out of the wall, but then, you know, they all do. As I say, it takes a long time.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, because that background is really, really strong against the purple flowers. But when I was doing the paintings, I didn't worry too much about it, I suppose. I think I just went for it in a really odd way of putting it. I did just decide to go for it. And I suppose I'd done quite a lot of paintings, even prior to lockdown starting, which was a bit of a kind of a phase where I was a little bit knocked off balance for a good couple of weeks, at least, at the beginning. And I think then realising, I don't know, just to try these colour combinations. And, you know, fortunately, it kind of works out. And often I look at a painting that I've done, I'll be quite surprised at the decisions that I made at the time. But yeah.
Yeah, I would come to your house every now and again, and you would show me the portfolio just to check in. It is a really difficult space to work out upstairs, and every time it's just been incredible, this journey of watching this body of work come together. Now I can't read this, but you know this work at the bottom, so I don't want to get the title of this wrong. This is actually unusually an available work, and this strikes me as being more a Speyside work.
Yeah, well, this is like a combination, really. I mean, a lot of the time when I'm making compositions, there'll be certain plants or a certain object that will be the starting point. So in this, it was the calendula seed heads, which are the spiky ones with the brown seeds in the centre. But actually, it's a combination of those, which is a calendula, a pot marigold, I'm sure people know, and then there are little echinops seed heads, that's a garden seed head, but around it are pebbles from North Uist and various places, and then the twisted stem is a piece of sort of heather, sort of when they burn the heather and you're left with the twiggy bits, slightly charred. That's a piece of that. So it's actually from a sort of various locations together. And the pot is, I'm not sure, is it Akiko Harai?
Kiko Harai, yeah, so that's lovely. I think, is that
which I got from the Scottish Gallery, and I really, really love her work. And so it's not any one specific location. It just kind of developed as I put certain elements in the pot, which is quite a small pot. It's probably only about 12, 15 centimetres high, something like that. So it's a very small scale still life, but the painting itself is actually one of the big ones. So scale for me often is very, often exaggerates scale, because the calendula seed heads are probably about the size of a 50p piece, but obviously in the painting they're much, much bigger. Yeah.
It's quite Japanese in the way that...
Oh, you've gone quite quiet, Christina.
Is that better?
Oh, that's better, yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I find this quite Japanese, this example of your work. I'm just trying to... And then it's... So, you know, you're going from this colour saturation into these whiter spaces. I find it quite Japanese. I've got one question, which is, are you influenced by Charles Rennie Mackintosh?
Oh yes, yeah, I absolutely love his work. I absolutely love his watercolours. the plant studies that he did, the ones that he did in Warberswick, which were I don't think they were all done in Warberswick, but certainly quite a few of them were done in Suffolk. The sort of, I think they were mainly pencil and watercolour. Just the simplicity of those, and also the way they were, which is what I love about certain botanical artists, although you might not define him as that, is that you can tell exactly what species of plant he was depicting, even though they're almost like a slightly exaggerated form, totally recognisable, and also very recognisable as his work, and they're almost more descriptive in the plant than something that to be much more botanically accurately painted. So yeah, I really love his work. Yeah.
And just to let people know, in the gallery we've got there's two very large spaces. So there's an internal room, and then there's the big L shape. And in the L shape we've kind of kept it very floral. And then within the interior room, this is where it's the classic feathers, cups, the bowls, the pebbles, which obviously goes hand in hand with some of the publications and so on that you're known for. I do have quite a lot of questions here about ceramics. I'm just going to ask Lisa to help me just adjust my screen a little bit, because I think I've dropped the image. This is a really beautiful example. It's just because I just want to lift this back up so that people can read the text that's at the bottom. Sorry, hold on, folks. Well, maybe it doesn't matter. Let's not worry about it.
I think that one's called Honesty, Aquilegia and Artichokes, I think. And it's a pen and ink.
Yeah, I painstakingly labelled all of these so that this wouldn't happen. And
I can't remember what things are called anymore.
I know that you want to talk about the pen and ink with the monochrome washes, because it is one of the features in the exhibition, and I do have some technical questions about the watercolours being freehand. Do you make pencil guidelines on the sheet or refer to a separate drawing and apply the watercolour freehand? So that's quite interesting, bringing in the mixed media that's within your watercolour, Angie.
Well, yeah, when I do the watercolours, I generally do. It does vary a lot, actually. I tend to do a pretty rough sketch with areas of colour in, but very, very loose. And then the watercolour can change an enormous amount as I'm painting it, because as I compose the still lives, I might add elements and take them away. So the actual composition that I'm looking at changes. So I do put pencil guidelines down, but there's a lot of kind of rubbing out and moving things around that goes on while I'm doing the images. And then with the pen and ink, I think because I felt that there were a lot of very strongly coloured works, I liked the idea of doing some more monochrome work, almost like as a kind of calmer area, or like just a different feel part of the exhibition. And so I'd just got this really lovely ink from Cornelison's, this French sepia ink, which is this lovely browny ink with lots of shellac in. And then I was using like a Payne's grey ink and also ordinary black Indian ink. So I kind of got a different colours of ink to work with, and then the colours or the tones behind, excuse me, were like watercolours, but derived from those colours of those inks as well. So just kind of like a sort of a counterpoint to the very, very bright paintings, I suppose, and also kind of relates to sort of when I'm doing printmaking and things like that, the reduced colour palette was quite nice. Just saying to just sort of making myself just limit myself was quite a pleasing thing to do. I enjoyed doing that.
Sorry, I was just mucking about with the screen to try and get the title. There we are, Honesty, Aquilegia and Artichokes. And listen, we've got the art shop right beside us here in Edinburgh, and it's amazing usually what happened in normal times is a lot of people would come in, they'd be so inspired by an exhibition, particularly this one. They go next door to the art shop and they'll buy the same paints. What is your favourite watercolour paint to use, Angie?
Well, I mean, the watercolours I use pretty well all the time, and I'm still not entirely sure how you should say it. It's shrinky. So I'm sure that's not how you say it. So it's Schimke, a German brand, I think. And I find those to be really good. The other watercolour set that I've got that I absolutely love, which I do use, it's quite a small set, and it's made by a company called Zecchi from Florence. And I got that because when I was doing my degree, in the second year we went to Florence, and we went to that art shop, which is quite near the Duomo in Florence. And when we went back over there a few years ago, we found that art shop. And I used to buy sketchbooks there, beautiful handmade sketchbooks and things, which they don't really particularly do those anymore, but they had these beautiful paints made with honey and what else was in them, but they have honey in them, and beautiful colours. But I always use that set because it just reminds me of that beautiful traditional art shop. Yeah, but it's the Schimke watercolours that I use the most.
We haven't even got onto printmaking or anything yet, Angie. We're almost running out of time. So here's a great image that reminds me that I've got several questions that I need to condense into one that makes sense. So your work does feature a wonderful China collection from Baudin, Revilius, the Festival of Britain era, and then more contemporary work and so on. Where did your love of China come from? And was it because you grew up near Stoke-on-Trent, perhaps?
I don't know if it has got anything to do with Stoke-on-Trent, but that is true. But I don't know if it is this, but I always liked pattern when I was very, very young. I was always very attracted to pattern. But there was one instance, which I always do remember, which when I was very young, maybe, 3, maybe 4 years old, very, very young, I was taken to visit a relative. I'm still not sure who that was, an elderly relative of my dad's. And she had a house full of ceramics and cabinets of things. And I think I really took a shine to this little tiny, I think it's Spode, tiny little coffee cup, straight-sided. And it was hand-painted with a shepherd and a flock of sheep, beautifully painted. And I clearly really liked it. And so she gave it to me. It's got quite a bad crack in it. So she just said I could have it. And I've still got it, though I've actually never included it in the painting yet. But I wonder whether that has any significance. I don't know. But I've always been attracted to pattern, sort of fabrics. And I know you often remember, when you were a child, you can remember the curtains you had in your bedroom when you were a child and all of those things. And I used to try to recreate patterns when I was a kid as well. I used to spend a lot of time trying to work them out and trying to redraw them. So yeah, it wasn't specifically ceramics when I was younger, but I think, it's just something that I've collected, and they're never they obviously got some Revilius ceramics and things, which now, are quite valuable, but a lot of them are just things from junk shops and, not things of any real value. Often they're quite damaged, which means that, they're a few pounds rather than spending a lot of money on them.
Well, I think anyone that knows your work can begin to recognise some of the pieces in prints and so on as well. I just think it's a really nice way. The exhibition's called Nature Assembled, so it is this assembly of other things which are personal to you. Now, other things that are personal to you, there is an absolutely outstanding shot of Ben Rinnie's. Is that the right way to say that? I should know.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a view near you, isn't it?
That's the view from the house where we are on Speyside. So yeah, just outside the window over here.
It does appear in the compositions in the back.
Oh, sorry, you've gone a bit quiet again, Christina.
Okay.
Still a bit quiet.
Is that okay? We seem to be fine. I'll just keep talking. But
yeah, good now.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
So in some of your compositions, Angie, this landscape is appearing more and more in the background, and I'm wondering if it's going to come into the foreground where you become a landscape painter. There's the River Spey that's near the studio as well. It's absolutely outstanding landscape that you have. Sorry, I'm now having to wind this up really quickly. This is you back in Edinburgh, and we're shifting you from your watercolour head to your printmaking head, and Now, I got this wrong the last time because my eyesight is becoming increasingly bad. You are making a print there. I'm pretty sure of it, Angie.
Yes, I am. I'm cutting a line.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness for that. I'm going to become better at knowing how you make your prints, because it's so technical.
But also, it's quite hard to tell in that picture, because when you post for photo, you can't be actually cutting the block. So it's quite hard for me to tell what I'm doing there, because I wouldn't be sort of doing it in that position, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm definitely cutting a lino there.
Actually, a great image. It gives so much information about what is in your studio and what's just outside the window. Yeah. I'm just going to rattle. These are just gorgeous examples of your work. I think we've touched on some of the technical aspects. There's the 1951 Festival Britain Cup. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a good image for you to focus on. Talk us through. This is a screen print.
Yes. So here I'm drawing the films for. So the prints on the right hand side. That's nature. It's called Nature Late Summer, which actually I did that for the Pallant House Gallery in Chichester, because they had an exhibition about David Jones coming up, and I'm really influenced by David Jones, and slightly not particularly looking at David Jones's work, but it was sort of influenced by looking at his paintings. And so on the left hand side, I'm just drawing on the transparent film to do, so each layer you can sort of see you've got a darker layer which I'm drawing some sort of stems with dots, and then beneath that you can just see as they get paler the films for the different colours are all stacked on top of each other. So eventually I think this is probably a 6 colour screen print, so eventually I have 6 films, a film for each colour that's then screened onto the paper, and I draw on the film with Indian ink and also lithographic crayons, because I used to like doing stone litho and zinc plate litho, and I quite like the fact that the film that I draw on has a tooth. It's called True Grain, and you get that sense of the texture a bit like a lithographic stone. So yeah, I like to draw with lithographic crayons, just to give that more of a sort of printmakerly quality to it, probably.
Obviously you're printing onto fabrics and so on as well. I mean, when did you first do a fabric, and what's the different challenges with a fabric design to printmaking?
Well, the first fabric I did was 2005, I think, when we set up St Jude's, when me and my husband Sam set up St Jude's. So that'd be 2005. Yeah, there's quite a lot. I mean, it's very beneficial to be a printmaker if you're going to start designing for fabric, because you do have that mindset of limiting the number of colours. So, every colour that you print obviously costs money. Different screens or rollers have to be created in order to print. So I enjoy that challenge of limiting the colour palette and trying to make 2 colours do a lot, using white line out of black and black line on white, and really, playing with that to get the most out of them. The differences are things to do with, quite often it's things to do with the weave of the fabric. You have to think about how fine your detail is that you're cutting in a block. They're actually screen printed, but I cut them as lino blocks initially. If you do really fine detail onto a coarse weave, all that fine detail just disappears. So you have to bear things like that in mind, something you wouldn't have to think about on paper. I like that thing of applying what I do to different processes. So I quite like those challenges. And again, maybe it's a printmaker's mindset, having sort of parameters that you have to work within. I actually find that really positive. If you've got an entire paint box full of colour, that can be much more daunting than someone saying you've only got 3 colours and it's got to be this big. And I almost respond really well to that.
This is your exhibition in 2015 in the downstairs gallery, and so you've got your that's Meadows Edge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then there's your watercolours, very, very confident, in a beautiful room downstairs, backed by our garden. Here's another image of it from the other side. What's lovely about our downstairs gallery is this is genuinely a building. So there's a fireplace, and so it's a real compliment. And then here is nature assembled, and then you've jumped upstairs. So just to give you a flavour, it's so much better when you see this in person. the intimacy of this work, that every single work is a total gem. As I've said before, there's so much to discover in your work. I've had one question about workshops. I know that you've done workshops in printmaking. Are you thinking in the future of doing more intensive workshops in printmaking and in watercolour, or just printmaking?
I think, well, I really enjoy teaching wood engraving, and I've taught lino printmaking in the past as well, but I mean, I really enjoy the wood engraving courses. Yeah, I've never really thought about teaching watercolour, and I don't know whether that's a throwback to the me being, you know, considering myself a printmaker primarily for so long. And it's one of those odd sort of things when I work. I would probably find it quite hard to describe to people how I paint my watercolours. I'm sure I don't do it the way it says. I've never actually read a book on watercolour painting, so I don't really know how differently I approach it, really. And I'm sure I don't approach it differently, but no, I'm not thought of teaching watercolour painting, but hopefully, you know, at the moment, it's quite hard to run courses that are so, you get very close to people when you teach wood engraving, obviously, because, you know, you're working at such a tiny scale. So at the moment, teaching wood engraving probably isn't something I'm planning but once things have obviously much better, things have improved, hopefully I'll be teaching courses again soon.
Well, that's come to the end of our presentation. I knew we were going to run on, but never mind. You've been absolutely fabulous. There's still more. There's so much more. Sorry for all of those out there who were asking really good questions. I'm going to post some of the questions to Angie, and we'll see if we can get some answers back.
Yeah,
this week,
any questions, I can respond to them.
Yeah, it's quite overwhelming. The screen was just popping up the whole time. I'm trying to, now I see how difficult it is to work in television. I'm not sure how great I am at it. Thank you, Lisa, for helping me in the background there. It is a pretty special Angie week. The exhibition runs until the 25th. If you can come to the gallery, or if you are worried about not feeling safe or whatever, just contact us and we'll make sure that you feel safe when you come into our gallery. We are cleaning for Britain at the moment. It's the cleanest place it's ever been. It's a wonderful exhibition. I do hope you can come. Otherwise, you can enjoy it online. We've got an exclusive film to show you in our newsletter tomorrow night. Angie and Simon have given us an exclusive film clip. It's not going to take up lots of time in your life. So I hope you can join on to that. If you haven't signed up to our newsletter, you can sign up just for that one and you can unsubscribe. But we also have a bumper competition this week. And I just want to again congratulate Angie Lewin for an absolutely outstanding exhibition in our gallery. It has, when people come into our gallery, they forget about all the worries that are going on, and we're reminded of the year that's been, and there has been so much beauty, and that's what you capture. Angie Lewin, thank you so much for your time in Speyside tonight.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure to exhibit in the upstairs space as well. It's been a great challenge, but it's been really good fun. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, and thanks to everyone for coming to the talk tonight as well. It's been great.
Thank you so much.